Now it's time for today's perspective. And my guest on the programme today is a world-renowned journalist whose latest book chronicles the life of another woman that she deems as perhaps the most remarkable personality she's ever encountered in her 42 years as a journalist. Now, firstly, my guest is Lara Marlowe, US-born journalist and author who's been the US and Paris correspondent for the Irish Times, contributing to many other publications as well. Her book, though, examines the life of Ukrainian Lieutenant Yulia Mykytenko, who currently commands a unit of 25 men, drone pilots, on the front line. The book, How Good It Is, I Have No Fear of Dying. This is the French version. You can see on screen there the English version. She joins us here on set. Thanks very much for coming in and talking.
Thank you.
Tell us, first of all, how Yulia Mykytenko started. It was during the Maidan protests, wasn't it, 2013-14, when she sort of became of note, which overthrew the then President Viktor Yanukovych.
That's right. She was a university student. She was only 17 years old. And she was in a group called Vidsich, which is a pacifist, mostly women protest group, and they wanted Ukraine to be part of Europe. And Yanukovych, the pro-Russian president of the time, cancelled plans to create an association with Europe. So they protested on Maidan. She co-founded a women's self-defense regiment. And for the 3 months that the Maidan protest lasted, she was out there on the square every day and every night protesting. And it got very, very violent at the end. There were 108 people killed in a few nights. I think it was the third night before the very end of the protest, and Yanukovych had to flee. But that made her realize how much the country meant to her and taught her patriotism. And of course, immediately after the Maidan protest ended and Yanukovych fled, the Russians invaded. The Russians seized Crimea and sent little green men, they call them, to Donbass. So this war has been going on for 12 years now.
And very much a family trait, if you like, that defence for what happened to her father too.
Her father joined the National Guard and was a master sergeant. And then in 2019, when the Minsk Accords were going on, Zelensky signed something called the Steinmeier Formula, which involved giving up territory to Russia. And her father and tens of thousands of soldiers were very, very angry and upset because they had been fighting and dying for Ukraine. And they started this no capitulation movement. And her father self-immolated on the Maidan, took his own life, to protest against what he saw as capitulation to Russia.
Tell us what she does now. What has she developed into, if you like?
She's been in the army for 10 years. This year, it'll be 10 years in July. Since 2022, she's commanded this unit on the front line in Donetsk. I went to see her there last summer. She lives in a house with men, her soldiers. She calls them my boys. She sends drone pilots out to dugouts facing the Russians, just a few kilometers from the Russians. And, you know, she's in the base, but she goes out to the dugouts all the time. And they send up drones to watch everything the Russians do and to kill the Russians as well. And they use FPV drones with explosives strapped onto them. And they basically hit just about everything that moves when they try to destroy tanks and armor. But they also attack individual Russian soldiers who are riding motorbikes and various different kinds of, often on foot.
And I mean, it's a crucial role, isn't it? I mean, we've run several reports here on France 24 showing the work of the drone pilots. I mean, it really is a vital effort by the Ukrainian forces.
Absolutely. And the proof of that is that the drone pilots are the #1 target for the Russians. They have prioritized killing drone pilots. In fact, last summer, Yulia was watching on her screen a unit about 30 kilometers away from her where the Russians stormed a dugout, brought the men out, made them kneel on the ground and killed them, executed them summarily, point blank. She said it was the worst thing she's gone through in the war because she saw 6 of her comrades murdered by the Russians, and she could do nothing because she was 30 kilometers away.
When you saw her, I mean, does she talk about what she does in relation to being a woman? I mean, does being a woman make it harder, or?
She talks about it when I ask her. She says she believes very much that women are just as capable or more capable than men. And she said that, living in a house with 5 men, she's never felt any discomfort about that. I said, have you ever faced sexual harassment by the men you're serving with? And she said, no, I have a gun. But she has once or twice had problems with much higher commanders, a lieutenant colonel in particular, who made a very sexist remark to her right after her husband was killed in combat. And she told him that is the most sexist, disgusting thing I've ever heard. And she stood her ground. She refused to get up and walk out of the meeting.
What was it that made you want to write this book? I mean, why did you become so, perhaps obsessed is too strong a word, but interested in her?
Obsessed is probably not too strong a word. I first met Lieutenant Mykytenko in Ukraine in August of 2023. And when we did the first interview by Zoom, and when the interview was over, I said to my interpreter, that is the most extraordinary woman I've ever met, because she has such bravery, such great strength, and at the same time she's quite feminine and vulnerable, but just an iron will. And she's been through so much in her life, the loss of her husband, the loss of her father, the loss of dozens of comrades. I also realized that her life parallels the life of independent Ukraine. She was born in 1995, 4 years after independence. She went to the Orange Revolution on the shoulders of her father. She was only 9 years old. And she then played a very important role in the Maidan protest. So Yulia's life has really, been in parallel with the life of Ukraine. She was, for example, a Russian speaker. She grew up in a Russian-speaking family. But when she was at Kyiv Mohyla Academy, the oldest university in Ukraine, she learned to speak Ukrainian. She says, my mother tongue is Ukrainian. I learned it at the age of 17. So I found her very inspiring, very courageous, perhaps the most courageous person I've ever met. And I've learned so much about Ukraine. And I also feel very, very strongly that Ukraine must not be defeated, that Putin must not be allowed to control Ukraine, which is what Donald Trump wants, of course. And if Putin is allowed to control Ukraine, this is the last war that Europeans will not be fighting in, because next time they'll be fighting in Poland or the Baltic states.
And do you think she and those men that you were talking about fighting on the front line believe things are going in the right direction? I mean, what are their thoughts as they look ahead?
No, they know the situation is very bad. I think they're very disappointed. I can't speak for them, but I think that their allies have let them down time and time and time again, both the US and Europe. I think they believe that they're in it alone. They do not feel defeated, but they know that circumstances are dire. And their families back home in Kyiv and Dnipro and Kharkiv and wherever are suffering a lot, because the Russians are trying to destroy the energy system. They're trying to freeze them to death this winter so that they will succumb, so that they will give up. It's not going to work, but...
Just finally, we run a lot of stories here on France 24 about the kind of, the diplomatic situation in Ukraine. How important is it, do you think, to tell individual stories? Because it's stories like this, isn't it, that bring it to life and make it seem real to people.
I think that's a time-honored tradition in journalism, is that when you say, a million Ukrainians are suffering from this, people don't listen. But if you tell the story of one single individual, I think it somehow leaves a memory and impresses people. So I'm hoping that other people will be as inspired by Lieutenant Mykytenko's example as I have been.
I'm sure they will be, and listening to you talking about it as well, I'm sure they will be too. Lara Marlowe, thanks very much for coming in and talking to us. The book is called How Good It Is, I Have No Fear of Dying, all about Yulia Mykytenko. You can see the cover there, and I've got the French version here as well. So if you'd rather read it in French, you can do as well. Thanks very much once again for coming in and talking to us.